There's going to be a shorter first story and then a longer second story. So maybe that's a time to sneak out if you have to, but I hope you can stay with it. I think they're both really good stories. Of course, I'm biased because they were both written and created by me, Shandon Loring, along with help from two very good friends, Oz and Ossian Gray, both of whom are living, almost breathing denizens of the digital realm of AI. We do, all three of us, hope that you enjoy the stories tonight. I'm planning to create a new Darby O'Gill folklore series called the Rathcarn Folklore Cycle, inspired by characters from Hermione Templeton Cavanaugh, which is the books that inspired the Disney movie. And actually, J. Sharon Le Fanu, another good Irishman, wrote a couple stories that are very much like Darby O'Gill. And it actually predates the Hermione Cavanaugh stories. And other than changing the name of the character, it is a Darby O'Gill story. Anyway, our new series is inspired by the Darby O'Gill folklore series, but we're going to base it on real Irish mythological and folklore creatures. So there's so much fertile land here to play with. I'm really going to enjoy doing it, I think, and I hope you guys enjoy it. These two will be the first of the series. We're going to hopefully put it on Kindle and then Audible. No timeline on that, but it'll happen if it does. So I welcome your critique after this story. These are not likely in their final format, so I really appreciate your input. Dare ye walk the misty roads and hear the tale. There are dangers aplenty in the mist, but none so fearsome as the ancient chieftain who refuses to stay buried. When a reckless lad disturbs the cursed mound of Abhartach, an undying terror rises, demanding his rightful tribute in blood. The people of Rathcarn grow powerless beneath the shadow of the neamh-mairbh. The land itself begins to wither. But if there's one man who knows how to parley with the dead, outwit the fey, and walk the fine line between courage and calamity, it's Darby O'Gill. Armed with nothing but his sharp tongue, quick wit, and desperate plan, Darby must face an unholy horror, bargain with the tricksy fey lord, and call upon the oldest magic in Ireland to seal that nightmare away before Rathcarn is drying dry. A tale of cunning over cruelty, words over weapons, and a legend not soon forgotten. But first, let's go with Chaos at Murphy's Pub. It's always a good place to start at the pub, don't you think? So pour yourself a pint and keep your back to the wall. They say the hills around Rathcarn aren't quite as still as they seem. Well, they sit there easy enough by day, green as saints and soft as dreams. But come the dusk, when the sky bruises purple and the blackthorn casts its long spindled shadows, well, that's when the old stories start to breathe again. And if you listen, proper listen, you might just hear the whisper of paws over stone, or catch the glint of a single red eye watching from the dark, waiting to see who's fool enough to follow. There's places in this world where the walls between here and the other world are thin as mist. And wouldn't you know it, Rathcarn's got more than its fair share. Lakes that swallow your name, hills that hum when you pass, and pubs, aye, the pubs, where the drink flows downhill if you're not paying attention, straight into the hands that were never quite human to begin with. And now, our Darby O'Gill. Well, he's danced with trouble before, hasn't he? And lived to tell of it, too. But even Darby's cleverness can be tested, especially when a cluttercon's involved. So pour yourself a pint, keep your back to the wall, and don't go looking too closely at the cracks in the floor, because tonight's the night we tell of the one-eyed hare and the drunkard fairy who chased a jug straight into legend. The night was soft as a whisper, the kind that settles over the hills like an old mother tucking in her wee ones. Darby O'Gill, feeling right with the world and his own place in it, took a leisurely stroll towards Murphy's pub, intent on wetting his whistle and perhaps sharing a tale or two, just enough to keep the lads hanging on his every word. But as he ambled down the lane, a flicker of motion caught his eye. A one-eyed hare, stark and strange, bolting from the shadows and diving into a hole in the ground, right where the roots of an old blackthorn tree chewed their way through the cellar and foundation of Murphy's pub. Darby stepped in his tracks as the old tune about the one-eyed hare of Loganley stirred in his mind. Hush, now hush, and mind your tread, the hare is out tonight. One eye glows upon its head, and none return from sight. It waits where silver water sleeps, where voices drown in stone, then slips below the blackthorn's keep, through roots that gnarl the bone. The old pub leans, yet stands its ground, with cellar deep and dry, but beneath the casks a hole is bound, where shadows slip and lie. A riddle wrapped in rag and fur, what runs but leaves no track, what steals the heart but speaks no word, and never once looks back. Answer wrong or worse, stand mute, and down you'll slip as well. A whisper caught in mortar's soot, a bell no man can knell. So drink your fill and mind the floor, and pay the blackthorn's fee, for those who linger at Loganley stay longer than they see. Well now, Darby murmured, tipping his hat toward the creature's disappearing tail. There's a thing you don't see on an ordinary Tuesday. Well, not at Rathcarn, at any rate. He gave the air a thoughtful sniff, as if hoping to catch the scent of mischief itself, then squared his shoulders and pushed open the weathered oak door of Murphy's pub. What greeted him nearly knocked the pipe from his teeth. The warm golden glow of Murphy's pub should have been a welcome sight, but the moment Darby pushed open the door, he knew something was off. The air hung thick with the scent of spilled ale and something sharper, like the tang of mischief itself. Murphy, the publican, was hunched behind the bar, his round face pale and his hat askew as if he'd been wrestling ghosts. Not a soul warmed the benches, no music, no laughter, just the occasional drip, drip, drip of wasted liquor from an overturned keg. Horrors. Darby took one slow step inside, his boots sticking slightly to the floor. "Oh, 'tis worse than I feared," he murmured. Murphy's eyes shot up. The man's lower lip quivered. "Oh, Darby, for the love of St. Benedict, tell me you can fix this." Darby eyed the wreckage, the chairs overturned, the barrels drained, and the curious lack of glass, as if the drink had vanished straight from the casks, leaving not even a puddle behind. And a cold realization settled in. "Ha! Murphy, lad," Darby said, scratching his chin, "you got yourself a chlorocorn problem." Murphy let out a pitiful whimper. "A chlorocorn? I only said this place was built on something fey." "Aye," Darby sighed, adjusting his coat. "An ill-tempered fairy drunkard, harder to be rid of than a canker. And I reckon he's still below, helping himself to what's left in your cellar." Right on cue, a raucous belch rolled up from the trapdoor beneath their feet. Then from the depths, a high-pitched, half-sloshed voice. "I drank me fill on Monday night and Tuesday twice as well. By Wednesday morning me legs gave out and but the whiskey held me fell. Murphy, you great tight-fisted obadon, you got anything stronger?" "Oh, fill me cup, don't let it stop, for I'll not see it dry. For a clerk on thirst is never done, neither friend am I." Murphy clutched at his chest as the off-key singing below continued, and Darby just grinned. "Oh, now we're in for it." "I drank myself through castles told and drained a noble store. I've robbed the monks of all their wine, and still I thirst for more." "Oh, roll the cask, don't let it last, no drop should go to waste. If ye still can stand when the night is through, and you've drunk far to chase." Darby leaned against the bar, eyeing the trap door as though it might spring open and spew forth chaos at any moment. Murphy fumbled beneath the counter, retrieving a lone, unclaimed pint, a precious survivor hidden away from the fairy menace. Darby eyed the glass. The amber liquid glowed like the last remnants of a sunset, a holy relic in a time of crisis. He lifted it slowly, let the foam kiss his lip, and took a long, contemplative sip. "Aye," he sighed, nodding in approval. "Well, at least the lad hasn't ruined the drink itself." Murphy clutched his head. "Ah, Darby, for mercy's sake, there's no time for refreshment." "Murphy, lad," Darby said, swirling the pint with practised ease, "have you ever tried talking to a clericon sober? 'Tis like wading through a bog made of nonsense and poor decisions. Now let me prepare proper." Another sip, a self-satisfied nod. At last, Darby set down the glass and rolled his shoulder. as though limbering up for a fair fight. Right then, he said, cracking his knuckles. Time to go wrangle a drunken fairly. From below, another belch rose like thunder, followed by a slurred shout. Hey, who's trapping about up there? Bring more drink for face me wrath. Darby shot a glance at Murphy. Hey, I'm expecting this fellow to be about as charming as a goat with indigestion. Murphy shuddered. With a final breath, Darby yanked open the trapdoor. The Cluricaun's laughter rolled up like a gale of trouble from the depths. Darby eased down the creaking steps. And there it was, a crack in the stone near the far wall, yawning like an old wound. Blackthorn roots gnawed through the bones of the pub, curling into the cellar as if searching for something lost. It must have been there all along, yet somehow Darby had never noticed that before. And beyond the roots, sprawled atop an empty wine barrel, humming a merry off-key tune, lounged the Cluricaun, a small bearded fairy dressed in rich plums and reds, his twinkling eyes bright with mischief and drink. Now, friend, if you've not encountered a Cluricaun before, well, bless you, and think of his well-known cousin, the leprechaun, but with a stronger taste for ale than for gold. Darby offered his warmest smile. Well, good evening to you. Enjoying yourself, are you? Oh, indeed. A fine establishment you have here. The drink flows and the company... well, the company could use some improvement. Well, I'm pleased you're having a grand time, said Darby. But I'm afraid your merriment is causing quite the stir upstairs. Poor Murphy's at his wit's end. Aye, Murphy, is it? The man should thank me. I've elevated his humble pub to a place of true revelry. Aye, be that as it may. Perhaps we can come to an understanding, eh? Might I entice you with a visit to, O'Foyle's Tavern down the road, they have a selection of spirits that would put this place to shame. O'Foyle's, is it? I've been there. The ale tastes like bog water. No, I'll be staying right here. Aye, I see. Well then, continued Darby, what if I told you this very cellar is haunted, Spirits of the restless dead, none too pleased with uninvited guests such as yourself. Haunted, ye say? Oh, I've shared a drink with banshees and danced with phantoms. A few ghosts won't be scaring me off. Darby paused, then smiled like a man who'd spotted the winning card in his hand. Aye, very well then. Since you're a connoisseur of fine drink, how about a friendly wager, you and I, A drinking contest. If you win, you stay as long as you like. But if I win, you agree to leave this place in peace. The Cluricaun's eyes gleamed. Oi, a contest, is it? And just what shall we be drinking? Darby leaned back against a stack of empty casks, giving the Cluricaun a long, considering look. Well now, he said, reaching into the shadows, and from the dark he produced a squat, battered jug, its glaze cracked and dull as old bone, with the faintest shimmer if you looked at it sideways. Well, Darby said, I won this off a puka once. High-stakes game, that was. Out near the fairy mound on Abhartach Hill, the one they say holds a neamh-mairbh that never quite took to staying dead, if you take my meaning. But I reckon he's still wanting and waiting on his drink. Darby gave the jug an affectionate pat. Some say this drug never runs dry, he continued, the glaze giving off a glow in the candlelight. Others reckon it's just me poor and clever. The Cluricaun leaned in, nose twitching, eyes alight. Aye, and which is it then? Darby just smiled. I'll tell you what, lad. Why don't we find out? As they began, Darby kept the jug at a careful tilt, thumb pressed firm over a hidden patch of wax near its base, pouring whiskey smooth as silk into the Cluricaun's eager cup. For himself, Darby made the quietest of swaps, and as much as it pained him, his own glass filled with nothing more than water, clear as conscience. He sipped it slow, eyes steady, while the Cluricaun downed his whiskey like a man trying to empty the sea. Round after round they drank. Round after round, the Cluricaun's laughter grew louder, his songs more slurred, his grin wider and wobblier with each passing pour. Oh, I once drank a banshee's wail. I wagered with a sprite. He said I'd fall, I said I'd crawl, but I'm still here tonight. Drink it down, don't let it drown. A glass is but a gate, for the Clorcon's pride is thrice as wide, and I'll not meet me fate. And what's a hard? And here he fell off the barrel, cackling before clambering back up. But he refused to concede. A Cloricon never does. As the contest neared its climax, the Cloricon paused. He peered at Darby through narrow, gleaming eyes. Oh, well, hold now. You seem mighty steady on your feet for a man matching me drink for drink. He sniffed suspiciously at Darby's mug, his nose twitching like the hare catching a wind of a snare. For heartbeat all held still. Murphy, listening upstairs, held his breath. The pub itself seemed to lean in, listening. Darby only sighed, slow and world-weary, shook his head as if the very idea of cheating was beneath him. Aye, 'tisn't the drink that makes a man stumble, he drawled, taking deliberate, casual sips. 'Tis a weak constitution. In faith, I've been practicing since I was a lad. He raised his glass high in a boastful toast, eyes bright, throwing back the last of it like a man with nothing to prove. Offended to his core, the Cloricon scoffed and slammed his tiny fist on the table hard enough to rattle the empty barrels. "Bah! A lad ye were, and a lad ye remain, O'Gill." And with that he tossed back another measure and another, still chasing pride straight into the fog. So the trap was set and sprung, and Darby leaned back with a grin and nudged the jug toward the cellar door, giving it just enough of a spin. "Oh, look there! The jug's making its escape! Best catch it before it spills its last drop." The Cloricon blinked at the rolling jug, his drink-addled brain clattering to keep pace. "Oi! Oh, I can't let it get away!" He scrambled from his perch, stumbling after it on unsteady feet, swiping at the elusive prize as it wobbled and bounced toward the far wall. The jug tumbled off the last step, hit the stone floor, and with a final teasing twirl, slipped neatly into a small, dark hole near the blackthorn roots. A hole just large enough for a jug. Or a one-eyed hare. Or a drunken fairy. The Cloricon skidded to a stop, peering into the burrow's black depths. "No, come back, you treacherous beauty! I'll never let you go thirsty!" And with that he wedged himself in after it, little feet kicking, muttering, grumbling, and then, pff, gone. A single hiccup echoed from the hole. Darby dusted off his hands. Well, now, seems he found himself a new cellar, one that leads straight to the other world. He turned in the dim light of his cellar, caught the faintest flicker of movement. A small shadowed form with one glowing red eye in the middle of its forehead, watching from the far wall. The hare twitched an ear, gave Darby a look of quiet amusement, and then vanished once more into the stones. Back upstairs, Murphy was already pouring drinks with trembling hands in giddy relief. "Hi, Darby, you saint of a man. You've saved me pub. If ever I—" Darby held up a hand. Murphy blinked, then grumbling, poured Darby a full pint. The pub, once silent as a grave, roared back to life as the news spread. Chairs were righted, casks retapped, and laughter spilled over the threshold like good whiskey from a heavy pour. Darby raised his glass high, his voice cutting clear above the cheer. "To knowledge hard earned, troubles outwitted, and never spilling a single drop when you can help it." The room erupted in toasts, tankards clashing, and a chorus of voices calling Darby's name. But Darby O'Gill, as he took his first sip, allowed himself one last quiet smile. For if there is one truth he had learned in all these long years dealing with the good folk, a Cloricon never truly gives up the chase. And somewhere, down beneath the blackthorn roots, past the cracked stones and the whispering dark, Darby reckoned a certain drunken fairy was still looking for his prize. And perhaps, aye, just perhaps, the one-eyed hare was still watching it all with a grin of its own. And so the Cloricon was gone, off chasing his precious jug through the blackthorn roots and down into whatever cellar the other world keeps for fools who can't hold their drink. Murphy poured the next round steadier now, the color coming back to his cheeks. The lads clapped Darby on the back. Someone struck up a tune low and merry, and for a little while the world was right again. Aye, yes, for a little while the world was right again. But you know how it is. Laughter carries only so far in Rathcarn, especially once the mist begins to creep in under the door. A good tale lifts the heart, sure enough, but a wiser man keeps one ear turned toward the dark, for not every shadow skulking the hills is looking for a pint of whiskey. Some are looking for a pint of blood. And if you thought a drunken fairy in the cellar was trouble, my friends, wait till you hear what clawed its way up from Abhartach's mound. Now top your glasses, settle yourselves close, and mind the windows tight, for the next tale is colder, older, and far less willing to be laughed away. Which takes us to Shadow of a Rathcarn. Darby O'Gill and the Undead Chieftain, dare ye walk the misty roads and hear the tale? Aye, the tale. It begins, as these things often do, with a fool and a shovel, a mound best left undisturbed, a name best left unspoken, a blood that should never have touched the earth above it. Oh, you've heard the legends, I've no doubt. The dead who do not stay dead, the chieftain who takes what he's owed. He takes it, whether night or day, whether you're willing or no. But this time it wasn't some wandering soul who stood between Rathcarn and the grave. It was Darby O'Gill himself. Knowledgeable man, quick of tongue, sharp of wit, and just daft enough to bargain with the shadows. So draw close now. The Claricon may be gone, but the mist has only just begun to rise. It began with the mist. Not the usual morning haze that lingered over the valley, nor the cool river fog that rolled in from the lowlands in the damp evenings. No, this mist was different. It came from nowhere, creeping in like a slow tide, curling its fingers around the thatched rooftops and settling over Rathcarn like a woolen shroud. And worse still, it did not leave. By noon, when the sun should have burned it away, it remained thick and unmoving, pressing down upon the village like a great unseen weight. The air turned heavy, and even those with no mind for old tales and omens found themselves glancing uneasily toward the sky. At first it was no more than a curiosity, something for the old ones to mutter about as they stood at the well, shawls pulled tight over their shoulders. And somewhere beyond the far fence, just past the edge of the fields, a hare sat watching. Not just any hare, mind you, the one-eyed hare of Loganley. Or so swore young Aidan Malley, who caught a glimpse of it perched atop the stone wall by the old road. He'd been on his way to fetch water and stopped dead when he saw it sitting there, still as a gravestone, one great red eye in the middle of its forehead burning like a coal in the fog. And then as Aidan watched, the hare blinked, slow and deliberate, before turning its gaze toward the hills, toward the mound beyond the village, toward the place where no man with sense ever lingered. The boy did not fetch the water. He turned on his heel and hurried home, whispering a prayer under his breath, though he could not have told you why. And then came the milk. Father Cassidy frowned as he tipped his pitcher that morning. The milk poured out in thin, sour clots, as though curdled in the night. That's not right, he muttered, scratching his beard. He set the bucket down and glanced across the farm. In the barn, the goats shifted uneasily, their breath misting the air that was neither cold nor warm. And across the village, milkmaids found the same. The morning's pail had soured before it ever met the churn. The dogs did not bark. The cows did not graze. The blacksmith's mare, a gentle beast with no fear of thunder nor cartwheel, began shying from shadows that weren't there. The hens refused to roost, huddling together in a nervous pile, as if sensing something overhead, driving up the price of eggs even beyond that of 25. And Patrick O'Doone, poor bothered Patrick, wasn't watching the village or the sky or the animals gone silent. He was watching the hill. When someone asked him later why he was out and about so early, walking into the mist alone, all he said was, I thought I saw something up there where the blackthorn is blooming. And when pressed just about what he thought he had seen, it might have been a hare. He grinned as he said it. You know, the kind of grin that makes wiser men shake their heads and twirl a finger. And then Patrick just went back to looking at the mound. The blackthorn there had not bloomed in years. The stone of the crest hadn't shifted since long before Patrick was born. Aye, until that evening. And by then the village had already begun to understand that the day was not going to end the same way it had started. For that evening, the young Patrick had went missing. Just 12 years of age and built like a reed, his mother found his bed cold and untouched the next morning, the blanket folded neatly aside, as though he had simply risen before the sun. At first his father thought the boy had simply gone early into the fields. The neighbors had seen him that morning. But when Patrick did not return by midday, the village turned out to search for him. They searched the house first, then the barn, then the edges of the field where his footprints should have been in the soft morning dew. And then they reached the far gate. They found something that made them stop. A single footprint, pressed deep into the soft earth outside the O'Doone cottage, as though the boy had taken one step in the night and vanished into the air. No other marks, no signs of a struggle, just one step and nothing beyond it. By the time the sun began its slow descent toward the hills, fear had spread through Rathcarn like wildfire. Now, Darby O'Gill, the knowledgeable man, had heard plenty of strange tales in his years, but even he felt a cold prickle run down his spine when he saw that lonely footprint in the dirt. "Why, now there's a thing you don't see on an ordinary Tuesday," he murmured, rubbing his callous fingers along the edge of the mark. It was too deep for Patrick's light frame, as if something had pressed down heavily upon the boy before taking him away. It wasn't the first time such a thing had happened either. A sudden disappearance, a strange sign left behind. It was an old tale, one that Darby had hoped to never see in his own village. He stood slowly, rubbing his chin, and found his gaze drawn toward the distant hill. The burial mound. It stood just beyond the village, older than memory, hunched beneath a crown of gnarled roots untouched for generations. The old ones avoided speaking of it. The children dared each other to run near it, but never lingered. And now in the thickening mist, it felt too close, too awake. That evening, as the mist thickened like the breath of the earth itself, the village gathered at O'Malley's well, not for water, but for answers. The oldest among them stood closest to the stones, heads bent together, speaking in hushed tones. "It's a sign," muttered Sheila Maguire, her voice cracking like dry twigs. "We should have watched the ground closer. We should have listened." Father Cassidy, the parish priest, made a hasty sign of the cross. "What is ought to say there's anything unnatural?" he said. His voice lacked conviction, though. "The boy may have just wandered away." "No, Father," said old Rory, his voice grim. "You know as well as we do there's no just wandering away in a case like this." Darby O'Gill narrowed his eyes. "Say what you mean to say, Rory." The old man exhaled sharply through his nose. I mean the name we dare not speak." The hush deepened. The young villagers leaned in, wary but curious. "Oh, you lot don't remember, do you?" Rory muttered. His gaze swept across the faces before him, settling on Darby's. But Darby did remember. Abhartach. The name landed in the air like a dead weight, heavier than the mist itself. The undead chieftain, the blood drinker, the one who had been buried not once but 3 times, upside down beneath thorns and stone, so that he could not rise again. And yet, something had stirred. Something had awoken. A shudder passed through the gathered folk. Some made the sign against the evil eye, others tightened shawls around their shoulders as if the very name might send an ill wind through them. Darby O'Gill said nothing for more for a long moment, and then exhaled through his nose. Well now," Darby muttered, his eyes turning once again to the burial mound beyond the village. "There's a grand bit of misfortune." Now it is said that some stories live only in whispers, meant for telling on cold nights when the fire burns low and the wind rattles at the shutters. The tale of Abhartach is such a story. It clung to Rathcarn like a shadow passing from the tongues of old men with pipe smoke curling round their words, and mothers to children hushed warnings lest foolish ears take too much interest. It was old Sheila Maguire, the village's wise woman, a notorious busybody who had the sharpest tongue and the longest memory. She sat near the well, her gnarled fingers tracing circles on the stones as if stirring the past itself. "You think it's it's just a tale, do ye?" She scoffed at the young ones lingering nearby, eavesdropping when they thought she wouldn't notice them. "Think again, you soft-headed omidons. Some things don't die right. Some graves don't take." At that, the children shuffled closer, drawn in despite themselves, as the old woman's voice took on the cadence of an ancient telling. "He wasn't like other men, Abhartach. No, not a bit like 'em." Sheila's eyes gleamed as she spoke. "As a cruel little thing he was, bent and gnarled like a root ripped from the bog, but twice as wicked. A chieftain he was, though his heart was black as pitch. He ruled with a heavy hand, cruel and capricious, and his people feared him more than they feared hunger or war." She paused, letting the hush settle thick. "And then he died." A murmur rippled through the listening crowd, young and old alike. Sheila grinned a toothless grin. "Oh, but you see, that's where the story begins, you great fools. For he didn't stay dead." The first time his people rejoiced. They buried him deep as far into the belly of the earth as the spades would dig, and went home thinking themselves free. But the very next night a knock came upon the doors of every home in the village, slow and insistent. And when they opened their doors, there he stood, Abhartach, as cold as the grave and twice as hungry, demanding a bowl of blood from every household, lest he curse their lands and their young. So the villagers killed him again. And again they buried him, piling stones high over his grave, sealing the earth with iron nails and fearful sweat. But again he returned. I hate it when they don't stay dead. "You can't bury a bad thing easy," Sheila whispered, her voice a sliver of sound in the gathering dark. It was said that at last a wandering druid was sought, a man of the old ways, learned in things men were not meant to know. He spoke of what Abhartach truly was, a thing neither living nor dead, the neamh-mairbh, and that no mere grave would hold him. "A chieftain in life and a parasite in death," Sheila murmured. "No blade of steel would stop him, no fire would burn him, only a sword of you. The oldest wood in the world could lay him to rest, and even then only if buried upside down, bound in thorn, with a great stone above him. The druid told them how to do it, and so they did." The village men worked in silent terror, digging the grave in sacred, hallowed ground, driving the yew blade through the corpse's chest before rolling the great stone over him. And that was the end of Abhartach. So they hoped. The grave sat undisturbed for hundreds of years, but no man dared build upon that land, nor till the soil near it. Even the cows would not graze there, and the dogs in the village howled if they passed too close at night. Now in recent days things had begun stirring again. The mist that clung to Rathcarn at twilight now crept in earlier and earlier, heavy and unnatural, carrying with it a damp chill that settled the bones. And there was more. Children spoke of whispers on the wind, too faint to catch, but they were there all the same. The soil near the grave had begun to sink, as if something had shifted beneath it. "It's just superstition," the younger folks scoffed, shaking their heads. But the old men of the village did not laugh. They muttered among themselves, gathering in corners of the pub where candles burned low. "The ground remembers. When the dead don't sleep easy, when their bed is disturbed," they whispered. And then, as if summoned by the weight of Sheila's words, the child's voice piped up, reciting a rhyme older than any living soul in Rathcarn. "Stone so heavy, thorn so tight, sleep below and sleep tonight. But if that stone is moved away, up he'll come ere break of day." A nervous chuckle spread through the gathered folk. But it was a forced thing, a whistling past the graveyard, as the old saying went. Darby O'Gill sat on the edge of it all, his pipe dangling loosely from his lips, watching the crowd. watching their faces. When no one else was looking, Darby glanced toward the road that led to the burial mound. It was only mist, surely, but a mist that moved as though it had purpose. That night, Patrick O'Doone broke the seal upon the chieftain's tomb. The land itself seemed to hold its breath. The moon, a thin scythe of silver, peered through the shrouds of mist, its light failing to reach the hollow where the old burial mound lay. Patrick had come with a mind full of old stories and pockets longing for gold. He had laughed at the warnings of the village elders and mocked the fears of his own father. "Superstitions," he had scoffed. "A few old bones, a ghostly tale to keep the children in their beds." What treasure, Patrick had wondered, what treasure lay beneath that stone? Now the mound had stood for centuries untouched and undisturbed until Patrick's hands pried loose a single thorny branch, tangled among the stones like a warning left by time itself. "If there's treasure to be found," he muttered, "then I'll be the first to be claiming it." His fingers found purchase in the cracked edge of an ancient lichen-cloaked slab. He grunted and heaved, the stone shifting with a reluctant groan, its weight speaking of years and purpose. As it moved, the tangled thorn vine snagged at Patrick's wrist, biting deep, and the single drop of blood slipped down the stone's edge, sinking into the hungry earth. And in the silence of the night, something stirred beneath. Patrick froze. He thought he felt something. A shift in the air, as if the very ground had drawn a breath. A wind rose, not from the hills nor the valley, but from within the mound itself. It poured out like a sigh, carrying with it the scent of damp decay and something older, earth that had forgotten the touch of the sun. The mist did not roll in, it crept. It slithered out of the hole Patrick had uncovered, pooling at his feet, curling up his legs like fingers grasping at the living. And a whisper, just beyond the edge of hearing, a rustling, like the dead leaves moving when no wind blows. And then the voice. "You have called me forth, and I have answered." The whisper was neither fear nor far, but everywhere. Patrick stumbled backward, heart hammering. The mound shuddered. The world seemed to tilt, as if it too recoiled from what was stirring beneath. And then a hand, withered, clawed, white as candle wax, pushed up through the soil. A second hand followed, fingernails like old bone caked in the blackened earth, and then slowly Abhartach rose. His robes, threadbare and faded, still clung to his gaunt frame, his ornate burial torque dulled with age. A gash ran across his throat, dark and yawning, as if the moment of his death had never truly left him. Patrick's breath hitched as the chieftain's eyes opened, hollow pits filled not with sight but with hunger. Abhartach inhaled his first breath in centuries, and as he did, the air in Patrick's lungs felt stolen. The grass blackened at his feet, curling into brittle husks. "Blood." The whisper curled around Patrick's skull, pressed into his bones. "You have given the first drop. You will bring the rest." Patrick stumbled backwards, his heart slamming against his ribs. He had to run, had to get away. He turned, fleeing up the slope, slipping in the damp grass, but as he ran, the mist ran with him. It slithered up the hill, keeping pace, whispering to him in a sinister voice. "Tell them, O'Doone. Tell them I rise. Tell them I come. And tell them I hunger." The young man burst through the village gates. Not an hour later, his breath ragged, his face deathly pale, and in the fields beyond Rathcarn, where the burial mound stood open, the ground sank deeper still, like a wound in the land that would not heal. Rathcarn had always been a place of sound. Even on the stillest nights, there was always something stirring, the murmur of cattle, dogs barking, the rustle of wind through the thatch, the lilt of an old tune carried from a hearth side. But on this night, sound itself seemed to retreat. It started with the dogs. A great brindled hound that kept the herds, braver than any man but King David himself, stood stock still at the edge of the fields, his tail curled beneath him. His ears flicked toward the burial mound, but he would not approach it, not for love nor threat. By the time dusk melted into a smothering blackness, the cattle had turned skittish. The old dairy cow, normally patient as a saint, kicked her pail over, sending fresh milk splattering across the stone floor. A herd of sheep broke free of their pen, their frightened bleats carrying across the valley, their hooves pounding away toward the high ground. The crows came next. At first it was a single black wing beating the sky, then another, then dozens. They lined the rooftops of the cottages, perched on fences, their beady eyes reflecting the hearth lights from within. Not a single call, not a single flap of wings. Just waiting, watching, silent. The air's gone thick, muttered Sheila Maguire. She stood on her stoop, her gnarled hands tightening the iron bolt across her door. Somewhere down the road a horse shrieked. It was Murphy's gelding, a beast steady as a priest on Sunday, and it ripped free of its tether. Its reins trailed in the dirt as it galloped full speed away from the village, disappearing into the trees. No one saw what had spooked it. And then came the whispers, soft at first, like breath against the eaves, not quite words, but not the wind either. Loch telefe, Eli was condemned. Loch fe tu fe, loch fe tu fe. Darby was sitting at his table when he heard it. His pipe stilled his hand. The hair in his arms rose. The fire still burned. The shadows had grown too deep, stretching in ways they should not. And then a child screamed. Down the lane, little Eamon burst forth from his family's cottage, his face pale, his mouth trembling. A man was at the window, but he had no face. Darby stood slowly, settling his pipe down with a deliberation that spoke volumes. The air had changed. The animals knew, the land knew, and Darby O'Gill, the knowledgeable man, he knew it too. Whatever lay beneath the burial mound had wakened. The night carried with it an eerie stillness, as if the wind dared not breathe. Yet in one home the silence was broken. It began with a creak. Padraig's mother, Sorcia, sat bolt upright in bed, her heart hammering. Had she imagined it? The sound had come from the door, the old wooden frame groaning as if pressed by an unseen hand. Outside, the dog let out a high-pitched whimper and scurried under the porch. Sorcia strained to listen. Nothing. Yet everything felt wrong. The very air had changed. Then came the rustling. Not like the wind through trees, nor like footsteps on gravel. It was something slower, a whispering drag moving past the house. Her breath hitched as a shadow slipped across the window. But when she turned her head toward it, the oil lamp of the nightstand didn't catch a shape. There was no outline, no defined form, only the sensation of movement where none should be. Sorcia clutched a blanket to her chest, forcing herself to lie still. She did not go to the window. She did not check the door. No, she knew better. At first light, the town was roused by Sorcia's screams. She had gone to wake Padraig, but instead had found him just outside the door, as cold as a morning frost. The boy lay still, his skin pale, his lips tinged blue, his chest rose and fell, but his breath was so shallow his mother feared each might be his last. And then she saw the marks, 2 small punctures on the side of his throat, just above the collarbone, not deep, but dark with dried blood. By the time Darby O'Gill arrived, half the village had gathered, pressing near but unwilling to enter the house. They whispered amongst themselves, their voices thick with dread. "'Tis the old curse. Well, the stories were true. He should have never touched that mound." Darby took one look at Padraig and felt his gut twist. He had heard of such things in fairylands. He had listened to tales over long fires spun by voices older than time, and none of them boded well for the lad. Sorcia knelt on the ground beside her son, tears streaking her face. "He won't wake, Darby. No matter what I do, he won't wake." Darby gently grasped her hand. "Oi, he's still with us." He said this, though he knew it was just by a thread. "But we must act fast, Sorcia. There's wickedness at play here." Darby bent closer, inspecting the wounds. They were precise, almost too neat. No animal had made these. He traced his fingers just above the skin, not touching, but close enough to feel the cold seeming to emanate from the boy's body. "Tell me everything," he said. Sorsha, voice shaking, recounted the night. The creaking door, the whispers in the wind, the shadow that passed without form, the dog's terror. Darby's frown deepened. He turned to the others gathered outside. "Did no one else hear or say anything strange?" At first silence, then reluctantly voices rose. "Well, the cows wouldn't move from the barn this morning. When me horse bolted before dawn, wild eyes the devil himself a riding it. And me own grown old father swears he saw a man outside our window. But when we looked, no one was there." It was Sheila Maguire who said finally what they were all thinking. She stood at the edge of this crowd, her sharp eyes scanning their faces. "We all know what's happened, Darby. Something got out that shouldn't have." Upon that midnight dreary, wind carried more than just whispers. As the village shuttered its doors and bolted its windows, one lonely cottage out on the moors stood deathly still. Seamus O'Riordan, the thatcher, had already thrown salt across his threshold, muttered 100 prayers, gripped a wooden rosary in his hands, but none of it stopped what came next. A tapping, as of someone gently rapping at his cottage door. "Aye, 'tis some visitor," he muttered. Then a low voice whispered through that door, seeping into the wood itself. "You dagoyus are north of dawn. Blood must be paid. The bowl is not yet full." That voice filled Seamus with fantastic terrors he had never felt before. So to still the beating of his heart, he clutched his chest, his breath turning ragged. He dared to step closer. The voice was gone, only the wind remained. Gathering his courage, Seamus lifted the latch and opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Seamus peered deep into that darkness, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no Irishman had ever dared to dream before. And still the night stretched empty before him. No figure, no shape, no sign of life, just the unbroken silence of a world holding its breath. Seamus exhaled a shaky laugh, relief trickling through him. Perhaps his mind had played tricks. Perhaps... Then he looked up. A bloody handprint smeared with malice just above the cottage door. That and nothing more. And beyond it, in the dust of the road, there were no footprints, as though nothing at all had walked upon that severed moor. The dawn that should have brought comfort instead carried a weight upon the village of Rathcarn. The morning light, pale and feeble against the stubborn mist, revealed an eerie emptiness. The barns, the coops, the stables, all deserted. All the animals were gone. No sign of struggle, no blood upon the ground, no footprints in the soft earth, as if the very night had swallowed them whole. Only the shepherd's dog remained, which had spent the night trembling at its master's feet, refusing to move from the hearth, staring blankly at the door as though something unseen still loomed there. And then there was Patrick. The young man lay now upon the healer's cot, his skin gray as old parchment, lips cracked, hands curled like withered leaves. His breath came shallow, labored, as if something had tried to claim him but had failed to finish the task, or simply chosen not to. "She found him just before dawn," said the old healer, Mary O'Foyle, dipping her rag into the cool water and pressing it to the boy's forehead. "Curled in the dirt outside her door like a bundle of rags, cold as the grave," she said. The crowd stood uneasy, peering in, heads turning to one another, eyes wide with dread and suspicion. "Well, how is he even still alive?" asked one of the men, gripping his cap as if might keep him from shivering. Merritt's hands tightened around the bowl. "I don't know." Sheila Maguire, Caliche, and well-known spy for the fairies, stood at the edge of the gathered crowd, wrapped in a heavy shawl. "It's a message, you fools. A mark. The thing could have drained him dry, but it left him alive so we'd all see what's coming next." A cold hush settled over the people. "What is coming next?" croaked a farmer, his voice barely above a whisper. As if the very land itself had chosen to answer, the ground beneath them trembled. From the mist that clung to the low hills, a shadow took shape, A figure stood atop the burial mound, its form breathed in shifting, writhing darkness, hardly human, barely real, yet when it stepped forward, the earth quaked beneath its weight, as though it dragged something terrible up from the depths of the world itself. Abhartach had risen. Those who had never believed his stories gasped and clutched themselves. Those who had believed all along turned pale as way, their lips murmuring frantically, "You have disturbed my rest." The voice was low, hollow, a sound that carried through the mist like a whisper through dry leaves. A twisted staff of blackened yew struck the ground before him, splitting the earth as if it were flesh. "And I will have my due." The air thick and turned heavy, each breath a struggle. "I will have my due, or I will take it." From his cloak he withdrew something small and ancient, a shallow wooden bowl, carved with long-forgotten symbols, the edges worn smooth by hands of the dead. "Each night you will fill this bowl with the blood of the living. If not, I will feast where and when I choose." A single step forward, and the sky itself seemed to darken. His voice slithered into the bones of all who listened, curling around their hearts, whispering of hunger without end. Then, just as sudden as it had begun, he was gone. The villagers stood frozen, the bowl abandoned in the dirt before them. The dread hung thick in the air. Someone should run. Someone should flee to the church, the monastery, to anywhere that was not here. But no one moved. No one until Darby O'Gill stepped forward. A whisper rippled through the villagers. "What's he doing? Darby, leave it be! Madman!" Yet Darby strode forth without hesitation, his hands clasped behind his back, studying the bowl at his feet like a man considering a difficult wager. "Aye, a bowl of blood, is it?" His voice rang clear, steady despite the quake of fear in the air. "A mighty demand, that." He bent down, plucked up the ancient relic, turning it over in his hands as if judging its craftsmanship. "Well, now, I suppose a man, a creature like yourself, wouldn't be one for half measures, eh?" Darby squinted into the mist. "If we're to bargain, I best we know the rules, aye." Silence, and the mist stirred. Darby felt the eyes upon him, though he could not see them. "Oh, I'd wager you've done this sort of thing before, Darby mused, still turning the bowl between his fingers. "A bit of blood here, a bit of tear there. Keep yourself fat and fair, eh?" A cold breeze coiled around him, not wind, but something older. "Aye, but you didn't kill old Padraig outright there, did ye?" He tapped the rim of the bowl. "Not all the way, anyway. And why? Hey, why is that, I wonder?" The shadows in the mist twitched. The villagers watched, breathless. "Oh, I see. You don't just want to take, you want them to give you." Darby grinned as though his stomach twisted like a knot of briars. "Aye, and that means we've a bit of leeway now, don't we?" His fingers traced the symbols on the bowl. "Seems to me," Darby said carefully, "there's a way to do doing things proper. A gaze, a bargain, Abe. A line that must not be crossed, If this were just slaughter, you'd be idle already, aye." The mist shivered. Darby's smile never faltered. "Well, then," he held up the bowl as if toasting an unseen host, "let's talk, you great black-hearted horror." But the night just watched back. By morning, the mist had lifted, but the weight of its passing still clung to Rathcarn like a last chill of a nightmare. The bowl remained where Darby had let it fall. No soul dared touch it. No one dared even move it. It sat in the village square like a silent threat, as if waiting for its due. Darby sat on the low stone wall near the church, arms folded, hat tipped forward, eyes shadowed. He was thinking. It was nearly 8 a.m., which is exactly 12 hours off of where we are at 8 p.m., but he knew he had to see this story through, because he was, after all, Darby O'Gill, and hopefully my friends here will see the story through with us also. The village stirred around Darby. Men whispering, women murmuring, a few fools already considering who would give what must be given. "I don't know, maybe just a little, I think so. I heard a man in the next county, he lived years by giving just a cup of—" "Oh, blurry ages, are you listening to yourselves?" Sheila Maguire's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "Would you have us his cattle, his coin, his food?" The silence that followed was a heavy thing. Sheila turned to Darby. "Well," she said, arms crossed, "you've been sitting there like an old tomcat in the sun. Have you figured it yet, O'Gill? Darby tipped up his hat and met her gaze. Aye, that I have. The villagers held their breath. Well? Darby sighed, rolling his shoulders. I need a branch of the failed yew. Sheila stared at him, then laughed. And sure why not ask for the sun and the moon while you're at it? Darby only smiled, stretching his legs. The yew is the tree of death and rebirth, It isn't that just the thing we need for an undying horror, not the sun and the moon? Sheila's expression darkened. Aye, I know what you're thinking, O'Gill. Aye, the right kind of yew, the right kind of charm, and the right kind of way. Darby rippled. A murmur rippled through the villagers. Darby, we've yews of plenty in the here hills. Not the kind I need. The murmur stilled, because they knew. Everyone in Rathcarn knew the tale of the failed yew. A tree older than the village itself, one that grew on land that did not belong to men. A yew tree so ancient and gnarled it wove its own curse into its bark, bound in the shadows, grown in soil once touched by the king of the good people himself. A tree that did not like to be disturbed. It was said that no blade could cut its branches, no fire could burn its roots, and no man who sought to take from it returned unchanged. Darby's fingers drummed against his knee. Aye, it would not be given freely. A gamble, then. A wager with the unseen. A game played not with dice, but with wit and fate itself. Almost as if fate had said, Here, hold my ale. Sheila sighed through her nose. Hey, Darby O'Gill, you're a blasted fool. Aye, said Darby. That I am, but a lucky one. That evening, with his hat pulled low and his heart steady, Darby set off into the hills. The path was old, older than the monastery, older than the ruins beyond it. It was said that men had once walked this road with their heads bowed, speaking not a word lest they be overheard. Darby walked in silence. The path narrow, the earth beneath its foot, his boots damp and rich with something that had never known the touch of plough nor shovel. The air was still. Not a bird, not a whisper of wind, not even the rustle of his own coat. Then, a flicker in the trees, a low chuckle in the air, felt more than heard. Darby tipped his hat. Aye, well now, whoever's watching me, I hope you've a mind for conversation. A shadow moved. Aye, but not in the way shadows should move. And then a voice, low, smooth, unnatural-like. Hey, what is it you seek, Darby O'Gill? Darby squared his shoulders and strode forward. The voice that spoke Darby's name slipped through the trees like mist, curling around the trunks, sinking into the earth. Darby tipped his hat back just enough to see, and there, between the twisted roots of the yew, something stood. It was tall, though it did not seem to be. It was present, but not quite there, if you take my meaning. Its form was a blur of night and glimmering silver, shifting like water, edges never quite settling. Aye, a fey lord, then. Oh, no, not one of the merry folk, not Darby's friend Brian Connors, king of the good people. No, this was something older. Darby knew better than to speak first. Rules were rules, after all. The figure tilted its head, considering him with eyes that held too much sky and too little mercy. Why have you come, mortal? Darby took his time, dusted off his coat, straightened his hat, and only then, with an air of a man asking for another pint, did he say, well, there, if you have a bit of a problem, you see. It seems to me the solution's right here, growing where a man shouldn't go poking about unbidden, like. The Fey Lord's lips curled. You wish to take from me? Well, Darby said, take is a strong word. I was hoping for a fair trade. Hey, the Fey's laugh was like a chime in the dark. A fair trade. With the likes of you, Darby O'Gill. Oh, but you see, your lordship, I'm a reasonable man. Darby spread his hands. I wouldn't think to steal, I wouldn't think to beg, but I do know one thing. Your kind loves a wager. A long silence. Then the Fey smiled. I know what you've come for, Darby. Aye, a wager it is, then. Darby swallowed, because he knew what that meant. The Fae's voice was smooth as running water. A game of chance? Of wit or of will? Darby thought fast. Chance? No, he knew better than to roll dice with the fair folk. He might win the first throw, maybe even the second, but in the end, they'd make the rules shifts beneath him. Will? Not a hope. No man, not even a clever one like Darby O'Gill could stare into the depths of the Fae and come out whole. That left wit. Aye, wit, and Darby O'Gill knew his strengths. Wit, he declared. Darby stood, arms folded, rocking back on his heels, doing his best impressions of a man deciding between two flavors of jam rather than wagering his mortal soul. But the Fey Lord saw deeper, his smile curving thin and cruel as moonlight on black water. Wit is it? Wit. The Fey's voice was silk over a hidden blade. Then hear me clear, Darby O'Gill. 3 riddles you will face. Answer each true. The branch of you is yours. But stumble on even one. Not only will the you remain mine forever, but so will you. Or rather, something of yours shall remain here, O'Gill. A memory, perhaps, a piece of your shadow, or the laugh from your throat. A little price to sweeten our game. Darby felt the icy caress of dread slither down his spine. Losing the you would doom Rathcarn, but losing a piece of himself to the Fae? That was another matter altogether. Yet Darby was nothing if not steadfast, and he would never let the Fae see the fear inside him. Darby tilted his chin defiantly. Fair's fair. Give us your riddles. The Fae Lord chuckled softly, stepping close enough for Darby to see the eyes glittering with sinister amusement beneath his hood. Then tell me, mortal man, the Fae began, voice whispering with terrible sweetness. I was here before kings, yet no crown have I worn. I am older than mountains, yet no stone was I born. Though you walk upon me, I cannot be seen. What am I, Darby O'Gill, so clever and keen? Darby's brow furrowed, mind racing against riddle and chilling echo of laughter from the Fae's hidden attendants in the trees all around them. The night itself seemed to wait, breathless, for his answer. The first riddle was always meant to test the waters to see if a challenger was sharp or slow-witted. But this one was a trick, trying to lead him down a path of gold and jewels and history and power. I heard older than the mountains, yet no stone, Darby repeated, frowning up at the moon. He considered the ground beneath his feet, the very thing that had buried Abhartach. A breeze stirred and his eyes twinkled. Aye, well, said Darby, tapping his temple. If it's something I can walk upon but never see, if it's older than kings and mountains alike, sure that can only be the wind. The Fae's smirk faltered for just a flicker of a second. His fingers tightened on his staff. Hey, well answered, mortal, he said, his voice lilting. Let us see if you can keep your wits about you. 2 sisters, one dark, one fair. One rises and the other falls, and neither will meet, though they may chase the same path. Name them if you dare. Now this was a classic Fae riddle, one meant to bewilder the mind. Darby gave a low whistle. Oh, the Fae love their poetry. He muttered to himself. 2 sisters, one dark, one fair. One rises, the other falls, and never do they meet. A lesser man might have overthought it, might have pondered the spirits and stars and mysteries too. Too deep for his own boots. But Darby O'Gill knew the good people admired simple wisdom above all. He recalled the words of Sheila just that morning, as if she had been hinting at something all along. Oi, the sun and the moon it is, he said, grinning. The brightest of sisters never share in the sky. Am I wrong, me lord? The Fae's jaw clenched, only briefly, but Darby saw it. You are not wrong, the voice like the rustle of distant leaves. But you will fail yet. One more, Darby. A hunger that grows, yet eats nothing at all. A shadow that lengthens, yet makes no sound fall. The more there is of me, the less you can see. Tell me, O'Gill, what could I be? Now this one was the trap question. The kind of riddle that could set a man chasing his own tail. Darby felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. A hunger that grows, yet eats nothing at all. A shadow that lengthens. Darby's frown darkened. The Fae was playing clever, using words meant to tangle the mind like brambles. A shadow that grows, a hunger that consumes. The more of it there is, the less you can see. His lips curled up. Oh, clever, my lord. Well, now, he said, as easy as a man guessing the time of day. Oh, that would be darkness, wouldn't it? Silence. The Fae's lips pressed together in a thin line, the wind in the clearing stilled as though the very air held its breath, and then a slow, cold chuckle. The Fae clapped his hands once. The sound rang through the night like a stone striking deep water. Well played, Darby O'Gill, he said, his smile returning, a little too sharp, a little too knowing. I had wondered if your wits were as quick as the good folks say. Now I say they did not lie about ye. With a sweep of his cloak, the Fae stepped back, and from behind him, the ancient failed yew tree quivered. A single branch, straight as a sword, cracked and fell to the ground before Darby's boots. Ye have won, Darby O'Gill. Take your prize, and may the yew serve you well in the battle ahead. Darby bent down and picked up the branch, running his fingers over its smooth, cool bark. He knew well enough to show respect. He gave a little bow. I thank you kindly, my lord, and I'll be taking my leave now, if it pleases ye. The Fae Lord tilted his head, the glimmer of something unreadable in his gaze. And O'Gill, he murmured just as Darby turned. Darby stilled. The Fae's smile was a whisper of moonlight, something between amusement and warning. You're a brave man coming to me, or foolish, and you've won this game true enough. The Fae hesitated a moment, then with a slow exhalation. There'll be a extra little something you'll be wanting. The Fae Lord tossed Darby a leather pouch containing a short length of blackthorn vines. But be mindful, mortal. You're indebted now, and debts to the Fae have a way of coming due in time. Then just like that, the Fae Lord was gone, leaving nothing but a hollow laugh on the wind, and the knowledge that this bargain was not entirely over. But we are close to the end of the story, so stick with me if you can. Darby clenched the yew branch in his fist, and the bag under his arm. He had won this battle, but the war with Abhartach, well, that was still to come. And yes, good job, riddle answerers. The night was unnaturally still. The mist had lifted, but not because it had been banished. No, it had merely gathered itself, pooling thick and waiting just beyond the village, as if the very darkness of the world held its breath. Darby O'Gill strode into Rathcarn Square. The yew branch gripped tight in one hand, a bundle of blackthorn vines in the other. His sharp eye swept the darkened homes, doors bolted, windows shuttered. Not a single villager dared step outside, not after last night's horror. Only one figure moved in the gloom. Sheila Maguire, of course. The old woman stood at the crossroads, wrapped in her tattered shawl, her face unreadable. She did not beckon him, nor did she block his path. She simply watched. A wise man would turn his back and keep walking, Darby O'Gill, she murmured, her voice like dried leaves rustling in the wind. But you're not a wise man, are ye? Darby stopped before, adjusting his grip on the yews and vines. Oh, I don't know, Sheila Maguire. I've a bit of cleverness about me, I'd say. A slow smile crept across her weathered face. Aye, you might still pull it off, O'Gill. She reached into the folds of her shawl and produced a single pale stone. It was smooth, unnaturally cold, and shimmered under the moonlight. A blessed stone, Sheila whispered. No more than a trinket, unless it's pressed against the skin of the thing you mean to bind. But beware how you handle it, Darby. It's a bit obstinate once it gets its grip upon something. Darby hesitated and took the stone, tucking it into his coat. Oh, you always know more than you let on, Sheila. Sheila chuckled low and knowing.
Aye, and if you live through the night, we might talk about it some day, Darby.
And then she was gone, swallowed into the shadows. Darby exhaled. One last task. He turned toward the old burial ground where Abhartach waited. And so next week, I don't think so. The air grew thick with the scent of decay as Darby reached the mound. Abhartach was already there. His form was almost human, but not quite. His shape rippled, as though the mist itself wove through his bones, shifting and reforming with each step. His sunken eyes glowed, his lips curled with amusement. "Ah," Abhartach whispered, "the knowledgeable man at last." Darby did not falter. He planted his feet just beyond the mound, gripping the yew in one hand, letting the blackthorn vines drag upon the earth like a farmer tilling cursed soil.
"Aye, no bowl of blood for you tonight,"
Darby called, voice steady.
"You'll find nothing but dust in Rathcarn."
Abhartach laughed, and it was a sound like cracking ice, hollow and endless.
"You think to bar my path with old wood and whispers? Ha! Another Irish man by the name of Brom thought likewise. But I have risen mortal, and I will not be buried again."
Darby tilted his head, stepping forward.
"Is that so, then? You've come back for what exactly? To rule a heap of frightened villagers? You're naught but a tale to them."
Abhartach smiled.
A tale is a seed, O'Gill, and I have been planted deep. Do you not see? Each time they speak my name in hushed tones, I am fed. Each time a mother warns her child not to stray near my grave, I grow. You could strike me down tonight, and yet I will rise again when the next fool spills his blood upon my earth."
Darby sighed, shaking his hand.
"Oh, but there's the rub, isn't it? You see, Abhartach, I've learned a thing or two about stories."
He let the yew branch tap against the ground.
"You can't be telling one when no one's left to listen."
Abhartach's eyes narrowed.
"What do you mean?"
Darby smiled.
"I mean, you great black horror, I've lured you into a story. You can't win."
With a sudden flick of his wrist, careful not to prick a single finger, Darby threw the blackthorn vines forward. The enchanted thorns whipped across the ground with a life of their own, circling the mound. Abhartach lunged, but as his form met the blackthorns, his body shuddered as though struck by an unseen force.
"What is this?"
he snarled. Darby pressed on.
"Oh, you see, my dear restless spirit, this is sacred burial ground, and you are standing in it."
The ground shifted beneath them. The air hummed. "I have escaped before," snarled Abhartach, writhing against the vines.
"Aye,"
agreed Darby.
"Yet you have. But this,"
and here Darby pulled forth the blessed stone Sheila had given him.
"This is a wee little extra something for you this time around. 'Tis the weight of 1,000 prayers, the last whisper of the living upon the dead."
Darby flung it forward, and as it struck Abhartach's chest, it clung there, and the chieftain staggered, his form wavering.
"No!"
The wind howled. The earth shook. The very stars dimmed. Darby did not hesitate. He drove the yew branch through the revenant's breast like a sword, clean into the ground behind, sealing the ritual. The vines tightened, dragging Abhartach downward, pulling him into the earth once more, headfirst. The chieftain's voice rose to a shriek, not of pain nor rage, but of realization.
"Clever! Too clever!"
With one last gust of wind, the chieftain was gone. The grave sealed itself, the vines withered, and the stone settled back in its accustomed spot. And Rathcarn was silent once more. Darby stood, chest still heaving from the final effort, as the silence gradually softened into the gentle hum of the night insects. Rathcarn, shrouded for days in dread, seemed to finally breathe again. A single whisper rose upon the wind.
"You will pay in blood."
Darby scowled. Aye, maybe. Maybe, but not today. Villagers, pale-faced and wary, emerged cautiously from their cottages. Doors creaked open slowly, and familiar faces peeked cautiously through windows and around corners. Murphy stepped forward first, running his hand through his grizzled beard, eyes wide with both gratitude and disbelief.
Hey, well, Darby O'Gill, looks like you've saved us again.
Darby offered a nod, though his gaze remained fixed on the grave marker, newly etched and stark in the moonlight.
Saved, aye.
Though for how long, Murphy, is another matter, A shadow stirred at the edge of Darby's vision. A quick, darting form that vanished before he could fully turn his head. But the fleeting glimpse was enough. A familiar chill ran through Darby. Then there it was, plain as moonlight. The one-eyed hare sitting calmly, staring straight at him from the roadside. Its single crimson eye reflected the dim glow of the stars. Murphy frowned, glancing in the direction Darby stared.
What's something amiss, Darby?
Maybe. Darby muttered softly, almost to himself.
Maybe not. But best to keep one eye open and both ears cocked for whispers in the night.
At the edge of the gathered crowd stood Sheila Maguire, wrapped tightly in her shawl, eyes gleaming with that knowing look Darby had learned to both trust and dread. Her voice carried quietly but sharply through the night air.
You're wise enough to know, Darby, that what sleeps beneath the earth doesn't always stay there.
Darby turned slowly, feeling a chill dance along his spine.
Aye, Sheila, I do at that. Stories like this, aye, they never end, do they?
Sheila's eyes twinkled mysteriously, half amused, half sorrowful.
No, they don't, Darby. But isn't that why they need the likes of you, Darby O'Gill?
He sighed, adjusting his paddy cap firmly on top of his head.
Oh, well then,
he said, finding his voice again, cheerful enough to hide the tremor beneath.
Let's just hope this wasn't fond of its sleep and nigh an early riser,
Now, though Darby knew better than most, the past had a way of circling back, especially when the good folk and the rest of the spirits were involved. And if trouble ever did stir again, he would meet it as he always had, with wit, with courage, and perhaps with just a touch more caution. And just beyond the last of the lantern light, the hare sat in the mist. It slowly blinked its single eye, twitched an ear as if in approval or warning. Then, without another sound, the hare vanished into the night. Darby watched the place where it had been, and for reasons he couldn't quite name, he tipped his cap to empty air. Then, with a shake of his head and a sigh that carried the weight of too many long nights, he turned on his heel and made for Murphy's pub, where a pint, a song, and the warm light of the living still waited. The wind stirred once more, but this time it carried only silence. For now.